Good morning, everyone that's joined us so far, and thanks for joining us today. I'm Lisa and I'm Head of Marketing at Torchbox, and we've had an awesome response to this webinar, which means that SEO is obviously high on the agenda for lots of you, which is great. We decided to host this event off the back of our Super Trumps analysis, and for those of you that missed all of that, we carried out a sector-wide audit of 52 charities across 8 different subsectors, and it created some amazing results and interesting findings. So we thought, well, that makes a good idea for an event, so here we are. If you would like a pack of Super Trumps cards to play with your friends or family, then let me know, because I have some left, and you certainly don't need to go and start buying them off of eBay, where there's some canny person selling them for $9.99 at the moment, which is quite flattering, really. 2 of the people heavily involved in the audit and producing all of the sector reports that are available on the Super Trumps website were Emma and Nick, who are SEO consultants at Torchbox, and they are also your hosts for today. And they are joined by our maestro, Phil, who is our Director of Digital Marketing. So Phil is here to help with answering any of your questions. So if you'd like to ask a question, then please put them in the chat or the Q&A facility, and Phil will be answering some questions throughout the session on the chat, but for any that we're going to ask live, we will answer them all at the end. So we're going to save them all up and whip through the presentation and then have Q&A at the end of the session. We've condensed the content today into about 40 or 45 minutes, including questions, so it's going to be quite a swift webinar, but if you would need to ask any more questions at the end, then we've got time to stick around, so just let us know. So this is a webinar, so you can see us but we can't see you, but we would like it to be interactive, and you've all made a great start with using the chat, so please carry on that vibe, because that's great. And I am recording the webinar as well, so I can send it to you after, so you don't need to scribble loads of notes. And I think that's about it from me, so I am going to hand over to Nick to share our top SEO tips for 2022.
Great, so I'm going to kick off with this one, and our first point today is probably one of the most important. So we all want our sites to be driving more traffic, especially if it's from users who are ready to engage with your content and potentially convert. So the big thing that really stood out to us when we were auditing the sites for the Super Trumps audit was that there's a really strong link between having a lot of informational, evergreen content with driving large amounts of traffic. And there was one clear winner when it came to driving traffic, and that was the RSPCA. So what you're looking at here is the RSPCA's top trumps card, and then on the right hand side you're looking at the estimated monthly traffic across all the charities that we audited, and you can see that RSPCA is kind of head and shoulders above everyone else, with estimated monthly organic sessions of 1.9 million. So as one of the largest charities in the UK, and probably for one of its favourite causes, it might be unfair to use the RSPCA as our sole example. So we're also going to look at these other 2 sector winners as well. So these are the Super Trumps cards for WWF and Islamic Relief UK. So you can see that WWF was the organic traffic winner in the environmental sector. And you can also see that Islamic Relief UK was the winner in the international aid and development sector. But what do WWF, Islamic Relief UK, and RSPCA all have in common? Well, there's a number of reasons really behind this, as always the case in SEO, but there really is one thing that unifies all of these winners, and that thing is strong, well thought out evergreen content. But having evergreen content is not enough. So one technique that we see working time and time again is content hubs. So content hubs are a way to group your related content together. So usually in a kind of parent and child structure, like what's highlighted in orange on this graph here. So the parent page is usually the main landing page that's optimized to target those high search volume terms. So to use the WWF as an example, this could be plastic pollution. And then the child page is the supplementary page, and often there's more than one. And these help to build the relevancy around the parent page by building this kind of rich context. And so to use that WWF example, this could be ways to prevent plastic pollution, or it could be how to reduce plastic use. So by structuring the content like this, you can create these rich contexts around your important pages, helping to build their relevancy for these key terms and ultimately, hopefully, improving their visibility. So I think the easiest way to explain this is with an example. So I'm going to run through one from one of our winners. What you're looking at here is the RSPCA's Advice and Welfare Hub. So their Advice and Welfare Hub is very strong, and you can see that it's been split up into these kind of logical groups and subgroups. The first layer is whether it's a pet or a farm animal or a wild animal. Then it splits up into these kind of specific animals. And then the final layer contains more specific information relating to that animal. So here I've just expanded on the dog section. As you can see, the specificity increases as you go down the hub. And this is why it's a really good example of why it's a content hub. This is why it's a really good example of a content hub. Because you have these hubs within hubs, it helps to build the relevancy to those upper pages, as well as the child pages by grouping them all together. So all three of our winners have strong content hubs, but this is by far the most complex and considered. And according to our tool Hrefs, this section actually drives about 35% of their site's total traffic. And if you think back to that 1.9 million number, that equates to about 600K, which is just a huge amount of clicks. So if we turn to our other two sector winners as well, we can see that for each of them, their big traffic drivers are their informational evergreen content hubs. On the left, you can see Islamic Relief's Islamic Resources section that drives about 48% of their site's total traffic, according to our tool Hrefs. And WWF with their Learn section that drives about 35% of their site's total traffic. So this is the power of the content hub. And with strong content, other benefits will often follow that are not just traffic based. So let's walk through the WWF as an example. What you're looking at here is a selection of WWF's featured snippets for some really high search volume terms. So in total, our tools show us that they rank in the featured snippet for about 380 terms with a total search volume of 70,000. Sorry, two people have just joined the panelists section. I don't know if you can see that, Lisa. So I'm just gonna carry on. Yeah. So in total, sorry, I've lost my flow a little bit. So in total, our tools show us that in the featured snippet. Sorry. All right. I'm just gonna start again. Sorry, I got caught off guard because two unexpected people joined our kind of panelist section there. Right, starting again. So on this slide, what we're looking at is the feature snippets for WWF. And what our tools show us is that they rank in the feature snippet for about 380 of these, with a total search volume of 70,000. And what this means is that the WWF is ranking at the top of the search results with an enhanced listing for 70,000 searches per month, which is just, that's amazing. And the majority of these featured snippets come from their Learn Hub, which I just referenced earlier. So it's safe to say that WWF would have not qualified for any of these searches without their Learn Content Hub. But not only this, their Learn content has gained links from over 3,000 domains. And that includes about 190 from super high authority domains. And here we're classing super high authority domains as 80+. These include sites such as Wikipedia, the New York Times, the Guardian, the BBC, Huffington Post, and loads more. And without these evergreen pages, these links would have been pointed at other sites. So it's fairly safe to say that these other site editors, they clearly wanted to link somewhere, and they chose the WWF because that served the best purpose for them. So similarly to my previous point, none of this would have been possible without their extensive Learn Hub. And just to talk about Islamic Relief quickly, they're actually one of my clients. And one thing that we've been focusing on is developing this Islamic resources section. And so looking at their backlink profile, which is what's on the screen right now, according to Hrefs, so we're looking at 5 years worth of data. And what you can see is that in the past year, they've gained quite a lot of backlinks over the past year, around 2,000. And so digging a little bit deeper into the data in Hrefs, looking at these new links, we can see that about 60% of them were pointed at their Islamic resources section. So again, just kind of echoing that last point, that without these evergreen pages, these links, they would have pointed somewhere. So the other sites editors, they wanted to link somewhere and they chose Islamic Relief UK. So what I'm trying to say is you have to be in it to win it. And without this content, you just won't get these types of links. So what I've done is I've kind of demonstrated the power of these evergreen informational content hubs. So what's your next step? Well, I'm going to guess that you probably need to get someone in charge of the budget on board with SEO too. And so here is where I'm going to pass over to Emma.
Morning, everyone. So we have this plan for this fantastic content hub. But when you have competing priorities and limited resources and everyone is very busy, SEO can be a little bit of a hard sell. So you might have heard some of these things in the past. Things like, what is the ROI? And can't we just do another audit? And we focused on SEO last quarter. And our favorite one, we're designing a new website and it's not a good time, which we've heard before. So SEO can often be considered a bit of a mysterious dark art or a checklist that can be ticked off. And it can have a bit of a reputation as being a channel that's harder to measure and sometimes difficult for people to understand the value of. So with this in mind, how can you persuade senior stakeholders to get on board with SEO? Not just for your content hub, but for more widely at your organisation as well. So we propose 4 simple tactics for this. So start with asking them very key questions, show them compelling data, tell them in their language, not ours, and in language that they understand, and also change their mindset over time. So starting with ask them. So we often ask clients this question about what are the top 5 keywords that you absolutely must be ranking for. Phil, you've asked this question many times over the years.
Yeah, it's funny. That's one of the when I was first started at Torchbox, and I didn't really know what I was doing all those years ago. I was asked to run an SEO workshop in London with a group of charities in the sustainability space, and instead of thinking about how not to ask the SWOT question and just do a SWOT to get them exploring kind of the organic health of each of their individual charities, I thought I would just ask them during the workshop to Google like the top 10 keywords that they absolutely, surely the non-branded keywords that surely they ranked for. And I was thinking that there was no way that this was going to be a success. It would be a very obvious thing and everyone would rank really well for the keywords that they expected to rank for. But it was the sort of jaws that collectively dropped as people wrote down the terms that they thought they would be ranking for, like sustainability charity, and then realized that when they Googled them, they didn't. It was like I realized it was an incredibly effective way of getting that buy-in, particularly from, that's really showing senior stakeholders, showing them rather than telling them why they should be doing it. And I've seen that replicated in the science, the science sector, in the museum sector, in the nonprofit sector. It's like a super basic thing to do, but really a really powerful thing to do to help you get buy-in.
Definitely, keeping it simple. So what these keywords can do is give you an indicator of what senior managers care about, but it can also give you an understanding of their awareness of what opportunities are out there as well. And then showing them. So if there's one thing that can get attention like nothing else, it's pointing out how competitors are doing it better. So take the keywords that they've provided and just use a really simple ranking comparison table like this one. Obviously, if you're ranking really well, great. But if you do have competitors that are ranking you for these key terms, it's a really simple visual, but it can be a really compelling way to spark some interest in senior management. And you can also do this for obviously a much larger list of keywords and key topics to gauge where your biggest opportunities are, or some quick wins as well, potentially. And another example might be a competitor gap analysis. So in this example here, we've got keywords where Alzheimer's Society or Dementia UK are ranking, where Alzheimer's Research UK is not. So it might be the case that Alzheimer's Research UK doesn't want to rank for these terms. You have to really critically assess these competitor gaps because you do have different objectives. But if it was the case that, Alzheimer's Research UK wanted to rank for sundowning, for example, they'd be able to see really clearly from this visual that Dementia UK has got good content on that. Alzheimer's Society is in a top position for that. And there's a gap there, and it's just very obvious. It makes it very, very clear. And another simple data set that can be really compelling is a domain authority comparison. So domain authority is a third-party metric from Moz, which has been around for a long time. And it's a useful metric to use, especially for people who don't necessarily work in SEO, because a lot of people have heard of it. And it gives a nice overall idea about your site's performance in organic search. And it's a nice number. Everyone likes a number out of 100, right? So if we can line up your website against competitors in this simple visual in this way, we find that this one is also very effective in getting the attention of stakeholders. Another example is if you've got a problem with page speed, you might want to pull out page speed insight scores and compare those against your competitors. Again, just sort of demonstrating that, it's an area that needs attention. And benchmarking was really what was at the core of the Super Trumps project. We did this for a large amount of charities across a lot of sectors. But this is something that can be replicated on a smaller scale within your organization. So if you choose competitors that you really care about and you choose metrics that you really, really care about, everything that we included in Super Trumps was publicly available data. So you could replicate this. And we used Ahrefs and Moz for this, but you could use a tool like Majestic or SEMrush. There are other tools that you can try where you can get a free trial and then use this type of data set to just demonstrate the real world implications of not focusing on SEO when your competitors are. And next we think about telling them. So tell them in a language that they understand or in their language. So start by looking at organic search overall as a channel and seeing how it currently adds value to your organization. So find out what percentage of traffic to your website is coming from organic search. It's often higher than you think, and it's often higher than other channels. And what percentage of your key conversions are coming from organic search as well. So if you can say something like this, like 60% of the traffic to our sites coming from organic search, or 56% of our donations, these sort of statements are very difficult for stakeholders to ignore. And avoid SEO jargon. It's really easy when you're sort of living and breathing SEO to accidentally alienate your colleagues by saying things like indexable and canonical and XML sitemap and all these things that we SEO people are always talking about and no one really knows what they mean. It's really easy to forget that other teams aren't using those types of terms all the time, and they're also not focused on SEO all the time. In fact, they'll have their own terms and their own objectives, and sometimes they're not going to line up with yours. So our advice is to try to avoid using SEO terminology without explaining why your colleagues should care about those things, and in real world terms as well. So some examples, just little examples of this could be, rather than saying the content isn't indexable, just say our users can't find this content on Google, or the title tag isn't optimized. We're not using the same language as our audience in the content. They're just small adjustments to language, but it can make all the difference. And don't just focus on tidying up. It's really easy to fall into the trap of just using your SEO effort and your SEO resources to sort of tidy up smaller issues rather than focusing on what's going to have the biggest impact. So if your objective is to increase awareness or donations or sign-ups to your service, how will organic search contribute to those objectives? And so focusing on the bigger picture when you're trying to make the case for SEO, but also when you're describing your tactics, is much more likely to get your stakeholders on board. And it's also more likely to have the biggest impact. So an example of this might be the content will reach our target audience when they're actively searching for information, and this will increase awareness of our organisation. So coming back to these 4 things, the last one would be change their mindset over time. So very often we see SEO as a one-time checkbox exercise or a project. We're doing SEO audit, we fix some issues and great, we've done SEO now, like that's it. However, being successful in organic search long-term involves embedding SEO within your existing processes and making SEO business as usual. So a mindset shift that you might want to aim for over time is seeing organic search as an always-on marketing channel rather than a one-time campaign. So campaigns will have a beginning and an end, but SEO, PPC, content, they're always on, they're always important. It's very unlikely that you're ever going to say that you've ticked off content, and it should be the same for organic search. Those 2 things should go hand in hand, really. And this involves investing in some level of ownership over the channel and also building your core SEO team.
Which leads really nicely onto our 3rd point. So our 3rd point is about who should be in your core SEO team. This was a really interesting question, and it popped up in our last webinar when we were presenting the Super Trumps research. And it ties in really nicely with the last section and is definitely worth spending a little bit of time answering. So who should your core SEO team be? We believe that kind of at an absolute minimum, it should be the person in charge of your website, the person in charge of your content, and you. And so I'm assuming there that you are the digital marketing lead or maybe the SEO lead at your organization. So there might be a little bit of overlap in between these roles in terms of who's in charge of these aspects at your organization. It might be the case that one person might be wearing multiple hats, for example. But what I would suggest you do is try and create an SEO working group. And with that, you will meet up regularly to talk about what you're all working on and what your upcoming plans you have for your aspects of the organization, and most importantly, how it all relates to SEO. So once a month could be enough. And honestly, I think you'd really be surprised at what comes up. But there's a lot more people involved in your organization that you should be thinking about too. And so for starters, our thoughts could be your UX designer, your paid search and grants manager, your PR team, your social team, your display team, media team, fundraising lead, your events organizer. All of these people will be impacted by SEO work and also will impact your SEO work. And finally, of course, you should probably have some sort of SEO expert as well, whether that's in-house or agency or freelancer, helping you to just keep on track with an SEO strategy. So when you meet these people, you need to ask them, do you want traffic, organic traffic to your part of the website? And the answer will always be yes. And so what you need to do is talk to them about what they're working on and how you can support them with SEO. But now what we're going to do is just take a look at who's in your core team at your organizations. So hopefully you remember in the run up to this event, we sent around a form to respond to, asking who's involved with SEO at your organization. And we got 42 responses to that, which was really great and helped to give us quite a broad set of data. And what you're looking at here is a bar chart, just tallying all of those responses. But what I want to do is just to dive a little bit deeper into this and just take a look at who's in the core SEO team at your organizations. So looking at the top 5, we can see that the website lead and the content writer come out on top, which is reassuring, given what I was talking about earlier about forming your SEO working group. But just to point out, if we look at the axis, you can actually see that only around 22 or 23 organizations have these roles involved with their SEO. And given we got 42 responses to this, this means that about 50% of you are not including your website lead or your content writers in your core SEO team. So I guess the takeaway here is that there's definitely an opportunity for some of you to start developing this SEO working group. But really what I think is most interesting is looking at the bottom half of the table. And so what we're looking at here is all of the roles that receive less than 5 selections in the survey. And that represents about 12% or less of the organizations that we surveyed. One number that I would have really liked to have seen to be a bit higher is the paid search and grants leads. So only five organizations checked this box. And you know, SEO and PPC, they sit side by side with each other and they just have so much to learn from each other. And so much so that we actually did a whole webinar on this last year, which we're going to share a link to in the follow-up email, just in case you missed that. But what I would say is that outside of your core SEO working group, whoever's in charge of your paid ads and grants should really be #1 on the list of people that you should be talking to about SEO. Whether it's sharing keywords, plugging content, plugging content gaps, ranking gaps, all of this stuff can really benefit both channels. It's a bit less surprising to see that some of these non-digital marketing roles, such as fundraising and communications in the lower half of the table, these roles traditionally don't really overlap with SEO. But hopefully after today, maybe you might start talking to these teams a little bit more about SEO and seeing how you can help them out and how their work impacts you as well. But for other digital marketing channels, such as data analytics, display, social, as well as obviously paid ads and grants that I've just referenced earlier, I am a bit surprised to see that these channels aren't talking to each other as much as I would have expected. There are so many things that can be shared between these teams, whether it's finding out whether an organic traffic uplift is linked to a social brand campaign, or if it's help creating custom dashboards to report on your SEO work, or even if it's just seeing your upcoming creative for the display campaigns. All of these things, they help to build this rich context of your work and how it fits into your organization and will ultimately benefit your SEO. And then the final thing that really stood out to me was that there's only one organization that's involving PR with their SEO. So coordinating your PR team and the SEO team is really important, especially when it comes to press releases, to ensure that backlink opportunities are being correctly leveraged. So if you have a PR team, make sure that you're talking to them about SEO, what they're pushing out over the coming months, and make sure that they're aware of the power of the backlinks can bring to your site. And then I've just got one final point just to finish this section before I pass back to Emma to finish us off. And so, I'm aware that on this webinar that we have a whole range of organizations, from super charities all the way down to the smaller ones and everything in between. And I know that not every organization will have some of these roles in post. And so it might seem a little bit unfair, for me to stand here and call this out for those that don't. And I guess what I really want to say is that what I'm trying to show here is the breadth of aspects of your organization that could be impacted by SEO. And I guess the other thing is just, I'm just hoping that maybe this could give you some food for thought when it comes to how to approach your core SEO team.
Great. So you have this plan, you have this great plan for a content hub, you convinced senior management, you've got a core SEO team, you've been very busy, and all you have to do now is actually make it all happen and gain some rankings. And to do that, you really have to start looking closely at the exact keyword groups that you're trying to target and who you're competing against. And the question now is, how do you have success against the competition? So often when we think of competitors, we think of other charities within our sector, maybe charities in other sectors, and maybe the NHS if you're a health charity. But in reality, your competitors in organic search are much wider than that. So the types of organisations that are going for the top of page 1 of Google, you're looking at Wikipedia, every for-profit business that's trying to target the same topic or audience as you are, publishers, news, online retailers, Amazon, public sector organizations and government. There's a lot out there, and there's a lot of people that are focusing on SEO, and even things like social media sites as well. And so this is something that we noted strongly in our environmental sector audit as part of Super Trumps, because as you'd expect, everybody's talking about the environment, as they should be. And so in this example here, you can see that WWF, who we already know from Nick's earlier points, have got really, really strong content, and they are focusing on SEO, we would expect. But when it comes to certain topics like, you know, plastic pollution here or deforestation, they're actually losing out to National Geographic, which is one of the main non-charity competitors that we noted as part of the Super Trumps project. And it's worth considering that private sector businesses or publishing sites are much more likely to be putting budget behind SEO strategy. And so it's crucial to factor that in when you're choosing keyword groups. And am I suggesting that you then shouldn't try and compete? Absolutely not at all. But the key to choosing the best content opportunities is about realistically assessing the competition and therefore the effort required to rank well versus the potential payoff. So how do we do that? Start with Google search. So a common mistake that we see with content planning is that people aren't actually Googling the terms that they're trying to rank for. And looking at the results can tell you a lot about what Google thinks the user wants, and you can use this information to your advantage. So if you see a large number of blog posts in the results for the keyword that you're trying to rank for, it's very likely that Google considers that term an informational query that requires an explanation, and it's rewarding blog content. Whereas if you see product pages, perhaps it's more of a transactional search intent, and sometimes it might be a mix of both of those or something different altogether. So let's have a look at an example for charity gifts. So this term here, charity gifts, 2,500 searches a month in the UK. So it's a big term. And in the top results here, we can see charities. So we can see ActionAid and we can see World Vision. And we can also see Money Saving Expert and charity gifts, which is privately owned. So it's a fairly high competition search engine results page, but it's a high volume term and there's a clear search intent. Google is showing landing pages that are commercial where people are trying to buy something. So if you sell charity gifts, this could be a very important keyword for you. Whereas if you look at another term here, so we've got charity Christmas gifts. So this is 1,200 searches a month, so still high volume. And if you saw those two keywords, charity gifts and charity Christmas gifts, in a spreadsheet, you might expect them to bring up similar results. However, as you can see here, you've got 3 publishers in the top 4 results there. And then you've got ActionAid, which is the one charity. And ActionAid here are ranking with the blog post, not their transactional landing page, like in the other example. So if you really wanted to rank for this query, you need to be producing some blog style content rather than relying on your transactional landing page. And finally, you might think about trying a lower volume query. So you might think lower volume, less competition maybe. But if we look at great charity gifts, so 250 searches a month, that's actually a website called Great Charity Gifts. So this keyword's probably not worth the effort of trying to rank well if the intent is to visit this website and not yours. And then there's the question of whether you should actually be trying to outrank your competitors at all. So this is an example of a health information result. So on this, you've got paid adverts at the top there, you've got a double NHS result, and then you've got a medical knowledge graph as well. So if you're an organisation, let's say MS Society, the highest you can realistically rank here is just below people also ask, or within the answers for one of the questions for people also ask. And in the health space, we often get asked if we can help charities sort of compete with the NHS or the World Health Organization or the CDC, because these organizations tend to rank above charity websites. And what we generally say to this is that rather than trying to compete with the NHS for like diagnosis or symptom related terms, just get as high as you can and then try and focus on more niche user queries where the NHS aren't trying to answer it. And your organisation has got different objectives to the NHS. So try and focus your SEO efforts on keywords that align with those objectives, where you can provide unique value and expertise. So in summary, you've got 3 questions that you should ask yourself when you're choosing keywords. So the first one is there anyone in the search engine results page that looks like my organization? Is it 10 links of government or 10 links of Amazon? Because if it is, it's probably not worth going after. Number 2, is the content that I'm planning to write likely to rank alongside the competition? So am I trying to rank a donation landing page when I should really be trying to create a blog post that links through to a donation page, for example? And can I provide unique value over the competition? So can I produce better content than what is already ranking? And if the answers are yes, go ahead to content production. But if not, revisit your keyword research and identify opportunities to reach searchers where you can add that unique value. And if you choose terms with a clearer user intent and you properly assess your competition, you're much more likely to convert your efforts into real world actions, such as donations or sign-ups to your service.
Great. And so that basically that concludes today's webinar. And obviously, we really hope that you found that interesting. Maybe it's breathed a bit of new energy into your SEO strategy for this year. And I guess before we start answering questions, I'm just going to really quickly recap what we've spoken about today. So today we've talked about why the winners are winning and the importance of evergreen content hubs in driving traffic, as well as backlinks as well. We also talked about some of our top techniques that you can use to persuade senior management to get on board with SEO. We also covered who we think should be in your core SEO team and how you can build your SEO working group. And then finally, we covered an important approach to looking at your competitors. So looking outside of direct competitors and looking outside of the nonprofit space. So yeah, so that's it from us this session. Hopefully some food for thought in there for you. I'm going to pass back to Lisa and Phil, and I think we're going to try and answer some of your questions now.
Thank you both. Well, I have a couple of questions for sure, having listened to that, or some thoughts, I suppose, having been involved with the Top Trumps project across each of the sectors and looking at some of the trends that exist across each of those sectors. The first one, Nick, is for you. I guess, like in those examples you showed right at the beginning about like particularly around the WWF and RSPCA ranking really well, there's clearly two very different types of content here that you've flagged. There's that core content. So in the case of the RSPCA, that example you gave, you know, the different types of animal, and then under that the different breeds and the, you know, the training and the healthcare of those animals. In some respects, that I guess that's content that broadly will design itself, and the search volume is largely irrelevant. And I guess in the healthcare space there will be all of those kinds of things as well. But there were also examples where WWF really differ here, is that where I can see that, I don't want to put too fine a point on it, but some of those examples you showed are clear examples of content that have been probably created. And I can't speak, you know, with authority. We don't work with WWF. I'd be interested to hear from them in the chat if they're here. That content has probably been created as part of a content strategy. So can polar bears swim? That's not, I don't think, fundamentally answering a user need of one of the a WWF supporter. It's very much in that early funnel stage, and that indicates to me that it's probably been designed to help bring in audiences earlier in the funnel and is focused on organic search. Obviously, that's a totally valid approach, but it's a very strategic keyword that has been looked at and targeted. You know, not can polar bears run fast. It was specifically swim, which is probably being researched quite well in terms of volume. So assuming charities on this call have nailed that core content, the RSPCA type breed of dog, they've got that down and they're looking to increase the visibility of their charity. They're looking for wider content ideas that are backed up with data, you know, like that WWF content. What tools would you recommend that they could use to begin that research?
Yeah. So I guess whenever I get asked this question, I always have three kind of go-to tools that I think are a good starting point. And the first one is SEMrush and Ahrefs. They're much of a muchness, really. They provide very similar data, and you can often get a free trial for those if you're eagle-eyed. And so you can you can get all this keyword data from there. Pretty much we use Ahrefs here, and all of the data that we've provided today has come from Ahrefs. So it just shows you how far you can take it. But to answer your question about content strategy, there's a keyword research function in there that will help you find these keywords. Also, if you are also looking for more free tools, there's People Also Ask, and that is a tool where you can basically, I think you get 10 queries a day, and you can put in a keyword, and it will basically scrape all of the questions that are in the search results. So it'll scrape the People Also Ask box, it will scrape the the autofill, all of that, and it will just come back at you with a whole load of questions that people are asking. The one disadvantage of that is that it won't give you search volumes, so you're a bit blind when it comes to trying to prioritize those. And then finally, everyone on this call today is a charity or a non-profit, and so you will be running, hopefully, you will be running grants activity as part of your digital marketing strategy. And if you're running grants activity, you will then have access to Google's Keyword Planner as well, which is another tool that we use. That is essentially, it's a keyword research tool, as you can find keywords there. So yeah, so it's those three. So just to repeat, that's Google's Keyword Planner, Ahrefs or SEMrush, and Ask the Public. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Nick. I think it's worth saying as well, from our point of view, from an agency point of view, they're all of these tools, we benefit from non-profit discounts. So it's always, and they're not particularly well advertised. So Moz, for instance, and Ahrefs both offer charity discounts. Moz is a very, very good non-profit discount. So always worth reaching out to those tools to see if they can help in any way. They're always quite keen to do that. And I think my thing there, Nick, as well, is I know that we've had a lot of conversations internally about trying to avoid, I guess, what I would call like tool blindness, which is to have like all the tools. And whenever someone new from another agency joins Torchbox, they bring with them a kind of, oh, my favorite tool is X, Y, and Z. And actually, over the years, I think we found that being very restrictive in deciding on a core tool set of 2 or 3 tools is really valuable as well. There's a couple of questions across the sort of different ways we have of people asking questions here. The first is from Rebecca Richardson, who asks, very, very keen on the idea of a core SEO team, but what would your advice be? And Emma, I'll put this one to you. What is your advice for an organization who has limited resource or capacity when it comes to thinking about who should be on that core team?
Wow. Put me on the spot here. Yes. So, I mean, we work with a lot of organizations with limited capacity, and often, as Nick was saying, often you've got people wearing multiple hats. So that's okay. Obviously that our emoji people is kind of like a perfect world where you have somebody doing everything. And if you have all those people, it's sometimes harder to coordinate. Sometimes it can sort of be in your advantage if you are one of those people that are wearing, multiple hats within your organization, because you can really be the one who's at the forefront of making SEO a priority. So I'd say, my advice for limited resource or capacity would just be focus on the things that are going to have the biggest impact and the battles that are worth fighting. So it's really easy, as I said, to focus on things like, okay, well, we need to fix these like meta descriptions or whatever. And it isn't that meta descriptions aren't important, but they're only important on the pages that are visible in search, for example. So just streamline everything. Don't just Google like SEO checklist, go through the list and focus on those. You really got to think about, what am I trying to achieve here? Like, what am I trying to do? And how can organic search get me there? And just focus on that. And we have to do that at Torchbox quite a lot, because, we might have, say, a couple of days of consultancy a month for a charity, and it isn't a lot of time. So we just have to focus on the things that have the biggest impact. That would be my advice, really, and just talking to everybody that you can about SEO whenever you can, but in real world sort of terms rather than in SEO jargon. I feel like I've just said things that were on my slides there.
That's I would add as well, I'd put it in the chat as well, that some of the most effective things I've certainly been involved with in terms of getting people on board with SEO are things like working lunches, where I've gone down to charities and just talked to a totally random group of people really who have expressed interest, which is a great way is to invite people in who are interested, and to have those informal working lunches where you just talk about the kind of things you're doing. Really, it's very low pressure. You're not expected to provide results or anything in those sessions. That's a great way of getting people in, because loads of people are super interested in this stuff, and for whatever reason are not working on it directly. Lee Griffiths, one of our own clients from MS Society, has asked a question about this is a good one. ROI is a return on investment is a recurring question from stakeholders in terms of SEO. How best should we showcase its value every month or quarter or whatever reporting cycle you're working to?
I'll take that. So we are setting this up right now. So keyword performance would be one that I would look at. I'd be cautious of just relying on automated rank tracking. I would focus on keywords that are having the biggest impact for you and track those, but I'd also refresh that list very, very regularly. And so things like, what are the top 10 keywords that have driven traffic from Google Search Console, for example, that we know have actually driven clicks? Those types of kind of top line information. So really, really simple Google Data Studio dashboard that just has, the top 10 keywords that have driven clicks, the top 10 pages that have gained organic traffic. And you can maybe add filters by like the sections, for example. So if you've got a senior manager that wants a bit more detail, they can get that. But roughly, it's just kind of giving you year-on-year figures with some like little nuggets of information, which is generally enough. I think one thing that we do a lot, one thing that can be a common mistake as SEOs is just like give them every single keyword and every single bit of information, and often just nobody's got time for that. And it's obviously when you're following all of the keywords and seeing the progress on what the one keyword, you really want to shout about it, but there's a lot to kind of cover. So I'd just say start with like top line headings, try and do a dashboard if you can. And then look at year-on-year, tend to look at year-on-year visibility and link in your organic traffic to conversions. So just what is happening on donations or your goals in analytics and your conversions, and how is organic traffic impacting that? And focus on those things. So that does require some upfront work on the analytics side to know that you are tracking your conversions properly. And that is a limitation that we see for some organizations, in that the tracking isn't necessarily there. Work together with your analytics team or your partner for analytics to get that set up, and then monitor how that changes over time, as well as just traffic and clicks. And also show results every single time we put slides together where we put a screenshot of a featured snippet where the number one for the top keyword. People love that. Show the actual result rather than just the spreadsheet, because people like to see themselves at the top of the list.
Yeah, it's getting out of that kind of huge data sets that exist within each of these, very powerful tools. And I guess as well for us, some of the work we do is around kind of monitoring, particularly around rankings and rank tracking and keyword research. Is a lot of these tools don't offer a very, very easy way of looking at rankings en masse over a period of time. So people get quite panicked when they see dips and drops, and in the kind of SEO communities, you hear about kind of algorithm impact and stuff. And I'd say, we often have to do a bit of manual work to get out of those data sets patterns, and looking at how, don't panic if you drop from 1 to 4, because it will very likely change, by the hour. In some sectors, the humanitarian aid space is a good example. We see, the way that rankings change is incredibly dynamic. So being able to kind of see the bigger picture through that sort of longer term view of data is useful. A bit more work again, but definitely worth it. I think have we got time for one more question, Lisa? Are we all right for time?
Yeah, if everyone's happy to stick around, then yeah, squeeze one more in.
All right, cool. It's another one from me, I'm afraid. I'm full of questions. It's something that we've never kind of got around to discussing post Super Trumps and post the state of the sector audits we did is when we looked at the healthcare stuff. You talked about the difficulties and the challenges that come with occupying a SERP that has the NHS there. And I think you're totally right in saying that stop trying to like beat the NHS is always our first line of sort of attack when we're thinking about outranking them or whatever. And that identification that charities have very different needs and very different search terms for and owning those is really important. But one pattern that stood out as well that really surprised me when we looked at the healthcare charities was that it wasn't just that the NHS often outranked UK charities. It was often WebMD being a big one, you know, the big US medical healthcare website, but it was often that I would see like Canadian healthcare sites outranking, you know, and this is the rule, not an exception. It's the SERPs are littered with these examples. What would your advice be to a healthcare charity who was looking at that and thinking, well, you know, surely that's not fair game, but doable to outrank that? Would you say that's possible?
Yes, I would say that roughly, obviously, because it's SEO, I'm going to say it depends. But I would say realistically, yeah, I think that really, as I said in the slides, you want to get as high as you can that's realistic. And I do think that it's quite unbelievable sometimes how Google rewards sites in other countries for healthcare information. That isn't the best result. You know, really, you want UK-based information, you want UK-based support information and so on, particularly in the health space. So I actually find it quite unusual how often Google will focus on location as something that, you know, is really important for ranking, but then when it comes to health, will reward sites from other countries. And what it does tell us is that there's more that we can do. So if you're not ranking well against a site in another country, you know, especially where you see this like Canadian or New Zealand, you know, there's something there that you're not doing that they are. And so a lot of that, particularly in the health space, and we can't go into it too much now, but, you know, expertise, authoritativeness and trust, EAT, really, really important within the health and financial sectors, you know, more than others. And, you know, that's an area where these health sites, particularly WebMD, Healthline, they are following the algorithm updates to the letter. Every bit of detail that comes out about that, they'll be following that. And they are demonstrating a huge amount of expertise. You know, every single author is super qualified. It's all there. And so those are the things that I'd be focusing on to kind of get you as high as you can. But yeah, I do think it's realistic to want to rank above sites in other countries. Yeah, that would be my summary.
Thank you, Emma. So thank you to all three of you. Thank you, Nick, Emma and Phil. And thanks everyone for sticking around. We've still got quite a few people here, even though we're over time. Sorry about the glitch. I don't know what happened there. And I booted those two poor people out, so they were gone. So I need to go and find them and apologise for that as well. So I will be sending a follow-up email with any links that we've referenced and the deck and things like that and the recording. I also just wanted to let you know about our event that's happening on the 23rd of February, which is all based on testing on Facebook. So we're asked all the time about what to test and how to use the findings. So we're going to be looking at the 5 top tips for Facebook testing, and we'll also be looking at some of the common mistakes that are made by charities on Facebook as well, so you can be aware of those. So I'll send a link to register for that event as well. But thank you everybody for joining us. I hope you have a really good day. We'll see you later.